This is Bertha's World, episode 5, meeting Andrew Wilson, author of The Fourth Boy. Thank you very much to my sponsor, Hackma Press, and of course to the technical producer, Leisha Ratsju. And if this is the first time that you are listening to this podcast channel and you would like to know more about the context to Bertha's World, you may wish to listen to the trailer, which is in episode 1. So for this episode, I'm delighted to be joined by author Andrew Wilson, who is the writer of quite a few things, but how I know about him is because I went to a book launch of The Fourth Boy, which we will talk about shortly. But hi there, Andrew, and thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Pierre. Hello, great to be here. Thanks.
Thank you. So just before we speak about The Fourth Boy, Andrew, can you tell us, because a lot of the people who do listen and subscribe to this channel are people who've maybe either written one book and they thinking about self-publishing or traditionally publishing and so on, or some people haven't yet published their first book, so they're trying to learn from authors. And then, of course, there are also readers who just want to find their next best author. But the first thing I wanted to know from you is how did you get into writing? How did you start off writing novels?
Well, I had been since school days writing things, sketches, plays, and all that kind of thing. And that carried over into university. And then that eventually carried over into my career in television, where I was a writer and also eventually a series director for many, many years. And so the novel thing really started once I had left the industry around about 2020 or so, 2021. And then I thought, okay, I've never tried this. I really should. And I've never imagined that I could be something called a novelist. Absolutely not. Because one reads all one's life of most amazing authors. And you always think it's totally impossible that I could even try something like that. But I did try. And yeah, that's how it started. At first, also, after I'd written the novel, actually, I wrote a short story, which was published by the same publishers as well.
It sounds to me like you had what a lot of new writers always, and sometimes established writers, which we call imposter syndrome. You feel like, am I really a writer?
Absolutely right. No, that's exactly it. Yeah.
A lot of people remark about that, actually, that they feel like imposters, But it sounds like your journey started really quite a while ago. Actually, your sort of creative journey started quite a while ago. But I was going to ask you, what happened around 2020? Was it all related to COVID that made you switch, or was it something else?
Oh, no. It was a sort of serendipitous thing. I was commuting the previous 6 years between Carletsdorp in the Karoo, where I now live, and Johannesburg to do shows there and then return every month for a few days and back again and back and forth. And that also becomes quite stressful in the end. And so I decided, no, I'll remain here and write to commission, which is not a hell of a lot at the moment. And then in the television industry, here and there, one would be commissioned to write something. And so I set about writing the novel, which was really sparked by various things that happened around me and a visit to the museum in Oudtshoorn. And that's how that novel started.
Wow, that's amazing. But your commutes from Carletsdorp up to Johannesburg,
Yeah.
I can't imagine that was a simple story, because I don't think there's an airport in Carletsdorp, is there?
No, there isn't. I wish there were. Well, there is. There is one in Oudtshoorn, and I think in the old days, I think they flew commercially there. It's now a small. No, we drive to George, which is 1 hour away, and then we fly.
Okay.
Or
Okay.
or Tambo. Yeah.
And then how did you get commissioned work? Do you have an agent, or do you have,
No.
I mean, because of people you know in the industry from, your working career there,
Yeah,
that's how you mostly
that
get.
was exactly it. That was
Mm.
exactly it. People that I knew from the industry or a company I had worked with might call and say, want to pitch this or
Yes.
that, and do you have any thoughts, and blah blah
Yes.
blah. And then it would progress to script form and that kind of thing. But
Hmm.
few and far between. Yeah.
Before screenwriting, or maybe during screenwriting as well, in television and so on, weren't you a journalist as well?
I was never really, I would never really have called myself a journalist, even though I had studied it and have, I'm a newspaper addict as well. but I never went seriously into journalism like a lot of my friends at university did. And environmental television and environmental journalism and interviewing and that kind of thing, that I did a lot of. Also repackaging hours and hours of amazing footage. I worked for a company called Earth Touch in Durban, and the best cameraman you can imagine from all over the world, Antarctica to Tibet to
Oh,
wherever.
wow.
And we
Yeah.
would then repackage hours and hours of footage and come up with a theme and tell a story, to sell the story of wildlife. Because
Oh,
it's a
my
highly
word.
competitive field. It's an hectically competitive field,
Mm, mm,
and
mm.
you can't just lock off the camera at a water hole and hope to
No.
beat a show that gives you 5 lion kills and a wrestle between a monitor lizard and a leopard, which I have seen.
Really?
Yeah, I have. Unbelievable. Yeah.
Gosh. And now that you've written your first novel, is this something that you're going to be doing more of, or is it a once-off thing?
It's funny, sometimes you think, I actually don't have another one in me. Or you think, no, I must continue. I have actually continued. I have written a second one, and it's with the publisher now. And I'm also simultaneously writing 2 different short stories. I think so I don't get too tied up and bored with the one when I switch to the other. And
Hmm.
sometimes
So,
it's quite a good thing. Yeah.
yeah, so these two short stories and the other novel that you're working on, did they follow on the back of The Fourth Boy? Somebody approached you, or had you sort of decided once you'd finished The Fourth Boy, no, this is something that I can't live without. This is something that I want to do, and then just keep doing it, and then hope that you can pitch it to somebody or somebody approaches you.
Well, it's a great thing to be with Caravan Press as one of their authors. I always have that route to go, so I can send Karina the manuscript or tell her that I'm working on X, Y, or Z. And that would be obviously my first route and first stop, because I'm kind of part of that stable or family, as it were, at the moment. And
Mm.
it's fantastic. She's so encouraging and so excellent at what she does. Having just won an amazing All Africa Publishing Award, actually, quite recently, which was so wonderful for her. So I did think I should continue, and I did. I had an idea that I thought could really work nicely. So I sent a
Mm.
first draft to Karina and to another friend of mine whose opinion I trust. And oddly enough, the feedback that came back between the lines was both exactly the same. So I kind of knew
Oh,
what I had to do and how to
that's
do my
great.
rewrite. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I have completed that.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. This last weekend I went to Karina's house because she has something called Coffee with Caravan Press every now and then. And since I've moved to Cape Town very recently, and we're going to be staying here probably for at least a year, I think it was at your launch actually on the garden route. And we said we'd get together. So then when I saw that she has Coffee with Caravan Press, I made a time, went to go and see her. And I can just say that I can see why you feel at home there. She seems like a publisher that is just, once you're with her, it's wonderful to work with. And I think that's one other thing. It doesn't matter really for writers who they end up with, but they've got to have a very good relationship with the publisher that they're with and work with great
Exactly.
respect with each other, be
Mm.
able to be honest with each other, and so on.
Yes, she is a very intelligent, delicate, invested publisher.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that has been so wonderful about her, and fun, of course, as well. So it's
Yes.
been really great, that journey so far. I hope it continues for quite some time. But yeah, I haven't had feedback from my rewrite yet of the new novel. So let's see what
Mm.
happens.
Well, long may it last. Let's talk about The Fourth Boy. I bought a copy at Wordsworth when I was there, and I really thoroughly enjoyed it. It's been really quite a long time since I enjoyed a novel that much, I must tell you. So, what I would really like to ask you is a bit of the background behind the novel. How did the story come to you? How did it start to crystallize in your mind?
I think it all got sparked by a visit to the Oudtshoorn Museum. Normally, when one moves to a place, or even if you go holidaying, it's always great to pop into the local museum. I mean, places like Graaff-Reinet and some fascinating stories there that you would never believe. But yeah, this particular story was of the 500 Polish children who were brought out to South Africa during the middle of the Second World War. And they were rescued from Siberia. They were in Poland, they were Polish. And when Russia and Germany, when they were still allies at the start of the war, they cut up Poland in half, and the Russian half was shipped off. Jewish people, everyone basically, that they didn't want there was shipped off to Siberian camps, work labor camps. And these children actually were rescued from those camps diplomatically once Russia switched to the other side after being invaded by Hitler. And then the Polish government in exile in London, together with the Smuts government in South Africa at the time, organized with the Russians to release these people, these children, these 500. There were many other groups of children. Some went to New Zealand, some ended up in Kenya, some in northern Rhodesia, Zambia, and 500 came most bizarrely to Oudtshoorn, of all places. In 1943, in April 1943, the journey is an epic thing. It's something like there are movies like The Inn of the Six Happiness that I remember seeing. I can't remember, it was Ingrid Bergman, leading children across the mountains of China to escape whatever horror was following them. It was like that. They traveled. It was incredible.
Maybe we should just, because there are some listeners and readers of my newsletter, more than half, who are in Europe or in North America. And I want to tell them Oudtshoorn, so people from the southern part of Africa will know where this is, but it's in a part of South Africa which is called the Karoo. So there are two things. There's the small Karoo and there's the greater Karoo. This is, I think, in the small Karoo. But you've probably heard about the outback in Australia. So this is South Africa's version. Am I right, Andrew? Would I be right in sort of describing it a little bit like that?
I think, yes, absolutely. For a visual, definitely the Great Karoo is very much outback, and the Little Karoo slightly more lush, but still Karoo. It's scrub and it's succulents and those kind of plants.
Well, I suppose they were very pleased to leave, but were possibly quite surprised when they got to the...
Yes, 1942, 43. And eventually ended up on a British decommissioned troop ship. During the war, oddly enough, it went back to being a troop ship called the SS Dunera. And they were brought to Port Elizabeth Harbour, which is on the East Cape coast of South Africa. And they were held on board for a little while because there was some problem to do with the numbers. There were some teachers that came along as well, and they had to be accounted for. Nonetheless, they eventually ended up in Oudtshoorn, where they were housed, taught, and brought up as Polish as they could be, in the heart of the ostrich capital, the ostrich feather capital of South Africa,
So this part until now is all true. You discovered this in a museum in the archives in Oudtshoorn. Right. And then without telling the listeners the story, because at its heart, I think I mentioned in one of my newsletters, it's a mystery story. There's a lot, of course, else to it, but at its heart, for me, it's just a wonderful mystery story. And then after they arrive here, how much does the story stay with something that really happened, or is it all imagination?
So after the history around that period, and of course the book is set in two different periods. It's that period, which is the backstory of the four main characters, and then there's the 1980s in South Africa, which was a time of oppression. It was a time of censorship, bannings, deaths in detention, states of emergency. The very fraught period. So I kind of counterpointed a little bit those two periods, both vicious and cruel, and places where there's a lack of trust. So the four main characters, who are four boys at the orphanage, or let's call it the children's home, we pick them up in the 1980s, eventually, during this mystery, when they are now late-ish middle age, I don't know what you'd call it these days, or young, around 50, 57 or 58 or 50 something. So the story bounces between those two periods, and it was a friendship between these four boys. And then we discover what goes on. And at the core of the story is a journalist who goes on a search after the death of his mom. He goes on a search
Yes.
for his father, who happened to be living in Oudtshoorn. And that's where the mystery starts unfolding as he unpicks an entire history and an entire sea of emotion that stretches from 43 to 1980s. You know, there's a kind of arrow that runs from the one period to the other. Yeah.
Yeah, it really, from that point onwards, well, I mean, before that, the setting, the context is fascinating enough. But from that point onwards, it's a real page turner. It really is a wonderful, wonderful read. Yeah. So
Thank
what I
you.
wanted to ask, you're welcome. So what I wanted to ask you, I just wanted to, before we forget, I want listeners to know how they can get hold of a copy. So we know that Caravan Press, I've listed it in my newsletter. So I've sent out the website for Caravan Press. But if they wanted to buy it within South Africa, and then for those in Europe, North America, and other Anglophone countries, what would you recommend is the best way to get hold of it?
Well, I know it's on Kindle. It's available via Amazon as well. And apologies to those who are fighting Amazon at the moment, but they are one of the people. And then here in South Africa, in most bookstores, as far as I know Exclusive Books, various branches carry it, but one can never be certain at a given time whether it will be there, but it should be. Caravan Press has recently changed distributors and things are flowing well, apparently. So I think that's a good thing as well. So yeah, but Kindle, yes. Amazon, yes. You should be able to get it there. Yeah, definitely.
Right. And I like what you mentioned about Amazon, because of course there's an awful lot going on around these online bookstores. And I've been doing some research about some of the others like Draft Digital and a few others like that, which are actually really looking good. I'm going to do a program about that at some point. But for the moment, Amazon, I mean, one's also got to be practical. They do have an enormous reach, so you can always get a copy there. And then one other question that people often ask, I sort of give mentorship workshops sometimes in the Western Cape around writing, because the publisher that I'm with has a literacy foundation and likes to mentor new writers. So one of the things that I tell them always when they're thinking about becoming a writer is I say to them, I think one thing that you need to be honest with yourself about is what success looks like to you, because it's very different for different people. And some, if you want to be a New York Times bestseller author, well, then this is probably the route that you have to go. But if you just want to write a biography, some memoir or something, and leave it to your family, then this is probably what you go. So can I ask you, what does writing success look like for you?
Yeah, it's a very, very difficult question, really. Success for me, really, so far feels like when I get a personal message from someone on Facebook who's just finished it, or any number of people here in my hometown, or friends from the old Joburg days, or just random people that I don't know would send a message or come up to one and tell one what impact the book had on them. And that is a fantastic thing, because if you're working, in theatre is different, you get feedback straight away. But if television, you get zero, really. You would get a letter from ITV or BBC saying to your bosses, hey guys, thanks very much to you and the team. Okay, bye. After 26 or 16 episodes of whatever. It's not that one is seeking any sort of validation or praise, but this is a very different kind of a personal feedback, which is absolutely brilliant. Obviously, I'm sure every writer would love to have their book made into a 8-part Netflix series or a nice film.
Yes.
That deal is always something one would want. But generally, nice sales and great feedback to me is just to have it published was a huge success, firstly, anyway, for me.
Yes. Yes, that actually led to my next question, which I wanted to ask you is, most budding writers tell me that they would like to be traditionally published. So I suppose a two-part question to you is, what's your advice with regards to that? So the first thing is, if somebody really wants to be traditionally published, how long must they keep going before they decide, oh, bloody hell, I'm just going to
Yeah.
publish this myself? Or do you think self-publishing is really not what it used to be a decade ago? It really is a very, very different kettle of fish now. What sort of advice could you give to somebody who's contemplating whether to keep going with a traditional publisher or whether to think about self-publishing?
Oh, I mean, from my point of view, I was one of those that felt I really need to get a traditional publisher because the world of self-publishing, as you say, a while back and even maybe 10 or 15 years ago is very different to what it is today. But I knew
Mm,
nothing about that arena. But I had friends who had been published here and there, not many, but one or two or three. So someone would have been with Pan Macmillan, someone would have been blah, blah, blah. Then I would ask them questions. Fortunately, in my case, I got some connection via someone in one of those big houses to do a really early 5-chapter read, and got some feedback, which was quite valuable. But then I found Karina online at Caravan Press and I looked at what she'd published and I thought, oh, wow, okay, having no idea that she was Polish herself and that my book revolved around Polish children, and that she, in fact, is a member and a sort of signed up newsletter receiver of that very group of Polish people who are now in their late 80s who came out here. I think there are 3 survivors at the moment. And
mm,
so that was a serendipitous thing as well, in a way. And Karina loved the story for many reasons, and the Polish angle being one of them as well. But I would say, there's so many platforms now, and I only know them by seeing around like Book Talk, people who are writing in a youth market kind of thing.
mm,
It's a great platform to go to. So if you were a self-published person, I'm sure those are the kind of routes you might explore. But from my point of view, look, my entire television career, I never, like many friends, had the desire to form my own company and start,
mm,
I don't know if I was risk averse or what. It just wasn't the thing I thought of. And in a
mm,
similar way, I would not have thought, okay, self-publishing is a route for me, as opposed to trying to bang on a traditional door. How many rejections can one take? I have no idea, because Karina was so fantastic. It was almost sort of after 3 months of reading, it was instant. She said,
mm,
great, and then I thought, wow, okay.
mm. Yes, I say
Yeah.
that to students as well. You really have to, how many rejections, it's a very personal decision.
Mm.
And it really also speaks to the other question around what does success look like to you? What do you really want
Yeah,
to be able
yeah,
to achieve?
exactly.
I mean,
Yeah,
it sounds very business-like, but I think sometimes it is good to keep that perspective as well, just so that you sort of know where you're trying to
absolutely.
go. I mean, the publishing world is extremely, extremely difficult. So it must be
Mm,
one of the most
mm,
difficult industries in the world, I suspect. So people do need lots of encouragement, I think, because
definitely, definitely.
um,
Yeah, yeah.
okay, so one thing I'd love to hear is could you spend a minute or two reading a section for us from The Fourth Boy?
Okay, I'll read you a little piece from deep inside the book.
Oh,
Um,
good, good. That's
no,
important.
it's quite general. Okay,
Right.
so the context here is one of the main characters in the book in a situation of being trapped and has a dual sort of view of the Karoo, having been there at one point in his life when he was a different person to the person he is now, again in the Karoo. And he is
Mm,
confronted by 2 people and he is going at them in this way about the Karoo. Because,
mm,
it is a needle and a this and a that. Anyway, this is him. Okay. Confronting me and telling me who I am, not who I am. Why? Why is the Karoo so dry? Why does everyone look for a story in the Karoo? What is it people have lost that makes them think they'll find it here? Ordinary stories gain a spiritual leg up here. Did you know that? Just because it's here and not there. Why is it interesting that Oma Smith baked her way into the hearts of others on her sprawling farm and became a legend? Why does anyone care about Wimpitman Bason's stories of strangers falling prey to his peach mampood? Why does a story of a lost farm or a lost love or a family hiding their retarded youngster from the world in an attic speak to anything or anyone? People lose their sense of self here. They lose their minds. They hand it over in favor of a myth. They'd rather be found dangling from a rope in their shed and become a romantic myth than actually live. Isn't it strange that a place can have its own life and feed off the lives of others who seek only to feed a myth? The Karoo doesn't need our stories, not mine either. After being a lush, vast, semi-tropical paradise, the Karoo ends up dry, desolate, and harsh in the blink of an evolutionary eye. Can you imagine what that drama must feel like? Can you imagine how unforgiving that would make you? Can you see how small our myths are?
There you go. Thank you so much. That's beautiful, Andrew. That's beautiful. I want to tell you, I was born in the Karoo but left when I was quite young and then lived much of my life overseas. But since I've come back to South Africa, going back to the Karoo, there is something very, very magical about that place.
There is.
Well, I think if people were to visit it, they would see what I mean. Okay, I think that's basically everything I wanted to talk to you about. And just to say thank you so much for joining me, Andrew. And thank you for reading for us, and thank you for taking the time. I'm always surprised whenever I speak to writers, just what an absolutely remarkable journey each person has, and just how absolutely unique it is for each person.
It is. It's a completely unique thing. You know, you look around online on Facebook and Instagram, and they're always, you know, the entire world's trying to tell each other how to live. And
Yes.
here's an interesting quote from this one, and there's a fantastic quote from that one. And here's this writer telling us, you know, what the best way is to write and how. And the other one will say, don't listen to any advice, just sit down and have the idea and write, you know. And
Yes.
it is a unique thing for everyone. I have no doubt. Yeah.
Yes. I've just been doing some research around memoirs because I recently, by hook or by crook, I don't know, but I've got a contract for my memoir, which will come out the end of next year.
Wonderful.
But I've been doing some research around it. So I listen to some memoirists and what they have to say, and you know, publishing companies and editors and so on. And some say, look, if you want to be a good writer, you should do a master's degree in creative writing. There are others who say, never do a master's degree in creative writing. So just for those who are listening, it's one of those wonderful careers in which you really, really do find your own way. And somehow you just keep going, and each step is a little bit easier than the previous one. And you really do just discover your own way. And that's one of the parts that makes this career, this journey so special, I think. Well, thank you ever so much. And I wanted to say thank you to the audience, and just to end with what we usually say, if you remember from Bertha's law, Ifeoluwa, who always says, Bertha says, be free to be and to follow who you are. So I hope you'll join me again in about 2 weeks' time when we'll be doing episode 6. Thank you. Bye-bye.